Monday, May 18th here on Halifax Sports Talk. And unfortunately, guys, the Halifax Thunderbirds 2025-2026 season has come to an end. And, you take a look at this season, so much to be happy about, so much to look back at and feel good about as a fan, as a supporter, as someone that talked about it all year long. But this is kind of our season recap show here. And of course, Jeremy Keefe going to join me to break things down as he did all year long with me. And, Jeremy, we talked all year about staying optimistic. I got to give you credit. You are more optimistic than any of us. And, when you look at this team, what they were able to do, what they were able to accomplish, despite not winning a game in that championship series, how do you feel about what we saw this year from this team? Got to be proud of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm glad you're having me on today because, anybody who was listening this year is probably thinking they should do a wellness check on me today after those games this weekend. But honestly, especially Friday, right? The game, the first one where they were on the road and they lost that one 13-11. Now, that was a really exciting game. Going into the second half being up 9-5, I thought for sure the Thunderbirds, who typically are the ones making the comeback rather than trying to fend off a team, that they have a several goal lead over. I thought for sure, the Thunderbirds looked great in that first half and they were outplaying the Rock and they're clearly going to win game one. And then they just need to pick up one more of the next two and they're going to be NLL champions. And unfortunately, Toronto just really put things together in that second half of game one and came away with the win, a close one. Like I said, 13-11. Now, the game on Sunday was a little bit different. That one, Halifax never really looked like they were in control. I know there were times when they were up, but, only being able to get one goal in that entire second half. Like what a statement that is. Both Warren Hill and Nick Rose, like their teams owe everything to those goaltenders. Tons of saves, big ones when they needed them from both of those guys. And unfortunately, just in that second half, Halifax, even with the offensive firepower that they have, weren't able to solve him, right? One goal in an entire half, it's going to be pretty tough to win a game like that. So no, I'm very, very proud of the boys. They played so well and they were so exciting. And it was such a fun season to watch the Thunderbirds and see them, come from behind to, take that 8th spot into the playoffs and make it to the finals and, almost come away with a win in game one. What a great season it was. What a ton of fun all of us Thunderbirds fans got to have this year. And looking ahead, the future is really bright with the guys they have on the roster.
And looking at the Vancouver match, that game against Vancouver, 9-goal comeback, whether you want to tip your hat to the offense, tip your hat to the defense, to King of the Hill in between the pipes there. That kind of set the tone for what we could potentially see throughout this postseason. Nobody saw that coming. I don't think they would have seen that coming if you looked at the scoreboard at halftime. And then, of course, they come out and do that. And then, of course, the next one against Georgia, some people talked about it, and I had Pat Gregoire on with me to talk about it, where, hey, how much of an advantage is it to get to play game 3 at the Nest? With scheduling conflicts, they get to play game 3. And, of course, you and I both know that was going to go 3 games. Game 1 was a 12-7 win. Game 2, they're just blown out of the water, 21-10. And then they turn the page right away, bounce back with a 15-11 victory. So as you talked about, there's so much to be proud of with this team. And I think we talked about it all throughout the season. Every single month as this team progressed, that they gave us reasons to be optimistic. And, from a fan perspective, showing up to the Nest, showing up to the Scotiabank Center, you always had a feeling you were going to be treated with a good game. And, that's all you can really ask for. But do you feel like there should be any level of disappointment for not at least forcing a game 3? You and I were texting, of course, about that first game, in Hamilton, where, you talked about it already, but they probably could have had that one. Now, game 2 in Halifax, that's probably a different story. But Do you feel as great of a season it was, it's a bit of a disappointment to not win one game in that series?
I mean, it's always a disappointment to go to the finals and not win, right? Like, you know, being you know, somebody that cheers for the Oilers, like I know that pretty well over the last couple of years. Like, it's heartbreaking to go that far and not just make it over the finish line. So yeah, it does feel disappointing to not get a win and not come away with the NLL title. But like I said, you know, with the guys that are on the roster now, Halifax has a bright future, right? I mean, just picked up Casey Wilson this year. You got guys like Mike Robinson looking amazing, and Knox, and like, it's not just the pillars that we saw at the beginning when Stotts and Peterson were really putting the team on their back. Jameson also, I mean, I think he even had a better second half of the season and playoffs than he was playing early on in the year, and he was still playing at his normal caliber, you know, from game one. So yeah, it is disappointing. I mean, really, we should feel really good about getting to have NLL finals lacrosse in Halifax. I mean, that hasn't happened before. We take that as a win and hopefully build on it for next year. But you know, you mentioned some of those games, right? The game against Vancouver, Halifax coming in as the 8th seed against the number 1 seed, being down 7-1 at the half, and then scoring 9 unanswered to just take over. I mean, that's a comeback for the ages, regardless of sport. Like, it needs to be talked about in whenever TSN does those top 10 lists of the biggest comebacks in sports history. You know, they need to add that one in there. That's so insane. The first game of the year, the regular season, you know, way back in December, Warren Hill let 2 goals in. I think that, you know, we had looked at the time, there was only 2 other times in NLL history when a goalie had let in so few goals. Like, you know, we did see a number of games where Halifax lost by 1 or by 2. So I think a lot of the times, you know, when Thunderbirds fans were going to games, they knew that, okay, this is a team that is always exciting. They're not involved in blowouts. They're not just, you know, losing by a ton and just waiting, you know, like for the clock to run out. Like, these are games that are coming right down to the wire. Halifax wasn't always coming away with a win, but you could just tell that they were never giving up. They knew they were as good as every team in the league. They proved it playing against Vancouver and Georgia, and then even in Toronto, you know, having, you know, taken them to the limit in game 1. And you know, they didn't look like they were out of it in game 2 either, but you know, unfortunately that one ended up with, you know, a 12-7 final, so it didn't look quite as tight as the one before that. But you know, they proved that they can play with anybody. They beat Buffalo this year. You know, they took out Vancouver in the first round, then Georgia. I mean, these are some of the teams that everybody expected were going to go to the finals and maybe even win, and Halifax knocked them off. And then, you know, they looked like a great team. Just Toronto kind of had their number, and a lot of that has a lot to do with the great goaltending they got out of Nick Rose too.
To your point, we'll tip our cap to Toronto, right? That's the thing. We can talk about a little bit of a disappointment factor for the Birds, but Toronto, and people talked about the build that team had, you know, like, you know, the fact that they were able to kind of build it all so fast together and the way they work together in that team. Look, you got to tip your cap to the champions sometimes. And if you're going to lose to anybody, you might as well lose, you know, to the champions and in the finals and the way that they did, especially. I think that sometimes you look back on that comeback they had, and you talked about it. We should be talking about that for years. That comeback they had against Vancouver, a lot of teams would sort of have that flat spot or even a flat series after coming off that big win. You ride the high. It's sometimes hard for teams to have that huge upset, win that game, and then maintain that level of success all the way until the finals. So, you know, I tip my cap to them. Take a look at this tweet here from the Halifax Thunderbirds saying, hey, we fall short in game 2. Congratulations to Toronto. A hard-fought series and championship, 12-2 final, of course. And it always makes me laugh, Jeremy, because across a lot of sports, you see this all the time. It seems like teams very rarely win at home. And like, I don't know if it's like because of game 6, or I guess in this case it was game 3, but I think across like NBA, NHL, now lacrosse, like, so many times teams don't get that luxury of celebrating a championship in front of their home crowd. It's just the way it ends up working out. But like the sticks were flying a little bit, the players were fired up, and the handshakes as always near the end. But it's getting to that time, where summer season's approaching, and people are starting to play for their other teams. But when you look at this Halifax team, you talked about some of the players that stepped up. We talked about the captain playing so well, and I thought Jameson, just like you said, got better and better, and he stepped up in clutch moments. But so the next question we ask ourselves as we move forward here: was this a one-off, or are the Thunderbirds here to stay? I mean, it's a very hard league to compete in, but look, you can't expect a 9-goal comeback every year. But is this a team that can say, hey, look what we did this year, let's do it again next year?
I absolutely think that it is. I think the future is bright for the team, and we had talked about this. They made some moves earlier this year, and one of them, which resulted in bringing a young guy like Casey Wilson over. I think that they were looking at this as, like, I think if we were to talk in the middle of the season with some of the management, I don't think they were saying, oh, we're making a push to go, we're going to go to the finals and we're going to, try and win this league. Now, I'm not saying they weren't hoping to do that, but I don't think that they were going, we're all in, we're grabbing this guy at the trade deadline because we're making a push this year. I think the moves they were making looked like they were bolstering their future, right? Like getting somebody, a young guy who's going to be, a top player in the league in the years to come, like Casey Wilson. So we had talked about that, thinking, okay, well, they're getting ready for, the long term, like having a strong team here over the next, 2 to 3, maybe even 4 seasons. And Halifax is really going to be a team that, a force to be reckoned with over the next few years. They just happened to get everything, clicking at the right time for this year also. But that doesn't mean that next season or the season after can't be even better. Like, let's keep in mind, they just squeaked into the playoffs. It's not like they were the team with the top record coming out of the regular season. So I do anticipate that we see some improvements here from this team going forward over the next year or two. Maybe they're going in with a first or a second seed rather than an 8th seed. And that does make things a little bit easier. It is interesting, like you said, about a lot of these teams aren't getting to celebrate their big win at home. I think back to, I just mentioned the Oilers. I think that also might have happened with the Blue Jays as well this year, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe all these other sports need to take a page out of the NFL's book and just, go to a neutral site to hand out the trophy every year, right? Like, it seems weird, but I think you're right. So there you go. Halifax has to watch, them hoist the trophy and, on their home turf, just like some of these other professional teams. And I mean, yeah, it's not ideal. I think when you're at that level, you're going to take the win, whether it's on the road or it's at home. You don't really care. You just want to win. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a little bit better had Halifax been able to win game 1 and come back for game 2. I mean, that's ideal. Didn't happen this year. Maybe it happens next year.
You let game 1 slip away, and all of a sudden that pressure on home ice or home court just gets that much bigger. If you win game 1, you're feeling loose, you're feeling relaxed, and you're feeling like, hey, if anything, we lose tonight, we got a whole week to prepare for game 3. And unfortunately, that doesn't end up happening. And game 2, not nearly as close as game 1. But they battled all the way till the end. And again, I got to say, optimism was the word of the show, I would say, for the year for us. And we'll take a look back. The season started off with 2 wins. It started off against Oshawa with just an absolute demolishing 11-2 win. They followed that up against the Bandits. They won that one in OT. And we're sitting here on the show thinking, man, this team's got what it takes. Then you see a loss against Saskatchewan, a loss against Oshawa, that little rematch. And this is where it got bad. Colorado loss, Georgia lost, and those weren't close. That was a 11-6, 11-7. So that was the month of January. We go into February, the losing continues with a loss to Buffalo rematch. We probably could have seen that coming, and another loss to San Diego. So here we are in March wondering, okay, what's going to happen here? They split March. But because of how tight the schedule was and how tight the standings were, it was all about winning at the right moment. And you look at the month of April with this team having just one loss all of April. And of course, the one of the wins being that win against Vancouver in the postseason, but win against Rochester, lose against Vancouver, win against Ottawa. And of course, that was the win and in scenario. So again, it's about winning at the right time. But I love what you said about, hey, maybe next year, they're making moves at the right time, or maybe next year they're coming in as a different seed. Because even though they knocked off a top dog, maybe you don't want to put yourself in that situation again to have to play against the top team. But then again, the Thunderbirds proved that any given game, any team can knock off anybody. When you think back to those games, Jeremy, I know it was a long time ago, but what do you think they struggled with the most? Was it just simply consistency? Choosing when they were going to play their game the best? Was it protecting leads the most? I found that this team, they struggled to play in like those playoff type games. Like they love to play, in hockey, we call it pond hockey. They love to roll the ball out and say, let's go first to, 18 or 19 wins. And so if you were at a game in person, they could have a 5-goal lead or be down 5 goals, and you still never knew who was going to win the game.
Yeah. And, in terms of what maybe was what their shortcomings were this year, they had a lot of games where they started pretty slow. And that's why I really felt good about game one when they were at the half up 9-5. I'm thinking Halifax is a comeback team. And if they're already up by 4 goals here at the half, then they should be able to coast into the win. But I guess maybe it's possible that you could say that they weren't used to playing that type of game where you're up by a number already and you just need to keep the other team from getting back into it. It's like they're that team that's a little bit better when they're chasing rather than being chased. So, because I think their transition looked really good. I think on defense, they're really tough. I mean, that's why they were able to handle Georgia in game 3. That was a big part of it for sure. We've talked about Stotts and Peterson and Jameson, Robinson and Knox, and then Casey Wilson as well, who is just, only going to come into his own even more as he's only played, 3 or 4 games in the NLL now at this point. Those guys can score. They're an incredible offensive, like roster of players. But let's not forget, Warren Hill was exceptional in almost every time he was on the floor. There's a couple of games where he did come out. You can't, expect him to play like that every single night of the year, but he kept the team in it so many times. So, it's hard to really focus on what the issue was with Halifax to not get over this hump in the finals, or what was keeping them from getting more wins throughout the regular season. They were right there with everybody in every one of those measurables. I think they just often started a little bit slow. Sometimes they made the comeback and sometimes they didn't. And, that's kind of what we saw on Sunday in that game. I mean, they actually came out looking pretty tough on Friday in game 1. So that was a little bit of an anomaly, but we saw it again on Sunday, very similar to a lot of the games this regular season, where they were looking like they were going to make the comeback and they maybe fell a little short, or maybe they came back and tied it up, but they still just, the other team got 1 or 2 in the dying minutes and ended up still hanging on for the win. So playing that full 60 minutes is probably the one thing that I think, would really help with Halifax, going forward. Now, it really depends. Anything can happen in the off season. We could be looking at a totally different roster. There could be guys who are ready to hang it up. I hope not, but we do have some guys who've been in the league a long time, and it takes a toll on your body for sure. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was a few guys who were finishing up at that point. I mean, maybe Keogh, right? Like a guy like that who had been around for a while, came back, made a really great impact in the last little bit that he did. But I believe when they brought him in, it was on, just like the 1 year contract kind of thing. So it's possible that we don't see him again. I don't even want to speak it about some of the other guys, right? Because like I said, they are, they're elder statesmen in the league, but I don't even want to say it out loud because we want them back on the roster next year so bad. But things could look a little bit different for Halifax at this stage right now. I think as long as they come out and they play from the moment that Jake Withers wins that first face-off that starts the game, if they start playing at that point and they don't have to make a comeback starting in the second quarter or the third quarter, then they're a team that can beat anybody in the league. Like I said, they've already proven that. They might not have gotten a win against the Rock this year, but they gave them their all in the regular season game and the two that they played in the finals. So Halifax is a tough team. They proved it, and if they can come back with a similar number of those guys that they had this year and just build on what they accomplished this year, then man, the sky's the limit for them next year.
Like when we look at this team, they proved, like you said, they can do everything. They could play defense when they need it the most and get the clutch goals when it comes the most. And I really, really think that this team, if they can pull it all together, they really have what it takes. So to give their fans a glimpse of what it's like to go to the championships and honestly to have these firework type games, like you said, just show us that after the first face-off win. But when we look at this team, we look at the unbelievable highlight goals we've seen from them. When we look at all the plays that they made throughout the season, and we look at the schedule that I just listed off, starting in December through January and February, to be able to battle through it. I mean, that 1 month where, what was it? One win and a handful of losses, and a couple of those were bad losses, to be able to battle through that. Because, as much as, hey, you get a week off to get ready for the next one, sometimes you play twice in a weekend, but it's almost not the same as a sport like basketball or hockey or baseball even, where you can just bounce back the next day. You have to sit there and reflect for a week on that tough loss you had. So for this team to be able to, gather it together, have a home game at the Nest, win and you're in, make the postseason and do what they were able to do, it's really, really exciting to think about. I already can't wait for next season. I'm thankful. I'm appreciative of the Thunderbirds for keeping us entertained during the cold months of the season this year. And, surpassing expectations is one thing. And the fact that you could still get better, as you mentioned, as long as you don't lose too many players in the offseason, it's an exciting thing because the team is only going to get better. So very excited for the future. And this team proved they could win against any team in the league. There can be some bumps, some hiccups along the way, but they have what it takes to get the job done. That's for sure. And also to get some national coverage. We had Pat Gregoire on the show. He's calling a lot of those games and, sideline there. But, to have TSN here for multiple playoff games, huge for us as Halifax Haligonians, but also huge for lacrosse in the city. To get some attention. And this team, since they've arrived, has been fantastic. So, we talked about it, a roller coaster. Any closing thoughts, Jeremy, on the season?
Yeah, no, agreed, right? It brought a lot of eyes on Halifax sports, and also another thing too is, you think about it as one of Canada's national sports, but there hasn't been an all Canada final in the NLL in a while. So that was nice to see, have two Canadian teams in it, right? One anthem finals was pretty cool. Also Halifax, like we said, we came out 2-0, they were on the top of the league, and then, went on a bit of a skid after that. It was a real roller coaster ride being a Thunderbirds fan this year, but I think a lot of people knew, maybe they weren't quite as optimistic as I stayed all year, but they would have had a little bit of that, because if you were watching this team, that the team was really an incredible roster of guys, even though they were, on a bit of a losing skid for a while there. They'd lose a couple by 1 goal, by 2 goals, whatever. But they were always entertaining games. Like you said, they really kept us all entertained and interested in Halifax lacrosse. That was the furthest thing from, oh yeah, there's a team here, but like, who cares? They're not very good, something like that. They were exciting. And then knowing that they had a chance, like as long as they win this one, or they can afford to lose one more, but they've got to win 4 out of the next 5, whatever it was, heading into the late part of the season was really exciting, because there were so many teams like Rochester and Las Vegas and San Diego, Halifax, that were all battling for one of those last spots. So it was like no matter what part of the year you dropped in and started paying attention, like it was entertaining. It was really exciting, to watch the Thunderbirds this year. I anticipate that's going to continue in the years to come. And let's not forget, this is still a pretty new team, right? Like they hit Halifax in 2019, I think it was the 2019-2020 season. Yeah, that wasn't even a full season. So 5-6 years of Halifax lacrosse, that's all we've had. The Toronto Rock, I can't remember how many they said that this is their first title in like 11 or 12 years or something, but they've only got a couple more than that, and they're a team that's been around for more than 20 years. So when we're looking back on 20 years of the Halifax Thunderbirds, maybe we're looking at a handful of titles as well. So yeah, it is a little disappointing to have not been able to win one this year, or even at least win game 2, and maybe we're looking ahead to a week where maybe they do win one next week. It is a little bit disappointing, but there's still plenty of lacrosse to be played in Halifax. So let's not get too upset about it right now.
If you're going to lose, you probably want to lose when it's the longest season you could possibly have, right? And to your point, you think about every team at all levels across every sport. You got to learn how to lose in the big one before you can win. Now, a lot of teams, you mentioned the Oilers. I mean, all about that with getting to the cup, but you think about baseball, NBA, whatever it is, you have to get to that benchmark before you can get back and then know how to win the big game. One thing to get there, but a whole another thing to win once you get there. So look, all the faith in the world, the future is bright in Halifax. And, as you mentioned yesterday, beautiful Sunday, long weekend day. I'm going around town, walking around, and I see the jerseys, I see the t-shirts, I see the hats, and it's great for the city to have a team like that doing so well. And I got to add this as well. The Halifax Mooseheads kind of being bumped out of the playoffs early in the year, that only added to people just attaching themselves to this team. So not saying that they wouldn't have got the support, but this city really embraced them. So you guys will see us all next year as well, talking about this team. If there's any off-season big moves, we'll try and keep you guys posted. But thanks to everybody that watched all year long. And Jeremy, huge thanks to you. Really had fun chatting lacrosse with you. Your optimism and your predictions and your chatter made me happy all year, and kept the show going. So look, I didn't think they were going to make it this far, let alone maybe make the playoffs. So hats off to you, man.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's great that they did. And like I said, it was not an easy run for them to have to go to Vancouver and then Georgia. It's not like they got to play just down the road or something like that. So, maybe an easier run through the playoffs next year, like an easier road to the finals would make a big difference. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, lacrosse in Halifax could have been over weeks ago. We got several bonus weeks, and we got a lot of really exciting times out of that. So, like I said before, the future is bright for Halifax lacrosse. So we'll just look forward to it.
All right, Jeremy, thanks so much. And thanks to all of you guys for watching. The future is bright with this team. Unfortunately, they fall short in the finals, down 2-0, or the losing 2-0. And that's a tough one to go out on home soil. But what a run it was for this team. From the win and in scenario to a big comeback against Vancouver to a serious win against Georgia. It was a great one this year for the Halifax Thunderbirds. Thank you so much for watching, guys. We'll see you next season.